Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I pinched my nose experimentally. Maybe things would be different if it were a little less flat. Probably not. The shape of my nose had never been the source of my troubles. The problem was my hair, specifically its color. I'd dyed it black for a while, but then the company that made the dye started cutting corners, so I stopped using it after it gave me a rash. Now my hair had returned to its natural dirty blonde. I'd never liked it much. For some reason, it made people think I was a sheltered rich kid or something, and I hated having to explain that my upbringing hadn't exactly been cushy. I decided to dye my hair some other color to get a tougher look, and I chose midnight black for the job. It worked, and I'd still be sporting it if I could have found myself some better dye. Should put that on my to-do list, come to think of it. I was 19 today, and I'd left Midgard 2 years ago. I felt like I'd gotten rougher around the edges in the meantime, which was exactly what I wanted. The sooner my boyishness was gone, the better. Okay, I told myself, washing my face with water from the basin. I dried off with the towel around my neck and gave my drab little room a once-over. The walls were made of steel sheets and plywood that didn't exactly scream high-class luxury. This place had been standing for over a year, but the interior was still unfinished. It was livable, sure, but it didn't feel permanent, no matter how long I lived here. And since I had no plans to move, I was determined to do something about the decor starting today. A birthday was as good as an occasion as any, and if I didn't take advantage, I'd probably put it off until next year. I'd gotten my hands on the wallpaper and paint the day before. Time to get to it. My resolve wavered fast, though. Once I managed to cover the steel and plywood with wallpaper, I was all up for quitting. I couldn't just leave this half unfinished, though. The can of paint for the ceiling had a warped lid, so it didn't close properly, and the paint would dry out unless I used it now. It was hard enough to find in the first place, wonky lid and all. It wouldn't be easy to get more. The paint was this new glow-in-the-dark stuff I'd bought from a less than reputable source. A total swindler, in fact. First, he tried to sell it to me for 1,500 gil, but I pointed out that the busted can wouldn't even close, and in the end, he let me have it for 100. It was probably stolen. Still, as long as the paint was the real deal, I wouldn't let it bother me. That was one of the rules. If you wanted to buy anything these days, don't think about where it came from. The paint would absorb light in the daytime and glow at night. Considering the current energy situation, namely that there wasn't much to go around, I'd have to be an idiot to let glow-in-the-dark paint go to waste, just because I didn't want to put in a bit of work. And I might be a slacker, but I'd like to think I'm not an idiot. Just as I was removing my shirt to get started painting, someone banged on the door. I stopped in my tracks and looked towards the entrance. Another bang, this time lower down. The entire shabby house shook. "Fabio Braun, we know you're in there." The deep voice was quiet, but there was enough threat in it to make me flinch. I stuck the rag I was going to use as a paintbrush in the can, held my breath, and put my shirt back on. My hands were shaking. Suddenly, I burped, and that's when I knew I was getting scared. "Better open up, or you won't have a door," said another man. I could hear the smile in his voice. Without answering, I looked at my boots. I'd had them custom made last year with monster hide I found at the market. Was today the day I'd get to test out the pointed steel reinforced toes? I'd taken good care of them so far, though, and there were hardly any scratches on them. I'd much prefer to keep them in that condition. Should I run? Where? Well, they were at the door, so obviously I'd have to go out the window next to the sink and the mirror. It was small, probably because it was sized for whatever piece of glass was laying around at the time, but not too small to squeeze through. I crept to the window and, almost as an afterthought, took a knife from the sink. It was a table knife, but I'd sharpened to use it for cooking, which made it sharp enough to stab someone if I had to. "Okay, your door has 30 seconds to live," said the funny one, apparently starting a countdown. The window didn't open. If I wanted out, I'd have to break it. But wasn't glass a precious commodity now? Too bad. The question was how. As I was casting around for something blunt and heavy to do the job, the door gave way with a disappointingly thin crash. Liars, that was 10 seconds tops. A man with flaming red hair and a slouch stepped into the remains of my door and smirked at me. His distinctive suit identified him as one of a pair I'd often seen in the plaza. That meant the other voice, the baritone, must be the big one with the shades and the shiny dome. They were always together, like a knife and fork. "Put down the fork before you get hurt, kid," the redhead said as he stepped closer with insulting lack of caution. "Don't make fun of me," I lunged at him with my fork. Wait, fork? A pitiful owl left my mouth as the redhead whacked my wrist with the edge of his hand, and as the useless weapon clattered on the ground. If I could just get my knife, I thought, but that was when his knee slammed into my midsection. Before I could completely double over, someone behind me yanked me up by the collar and into a full Nelson. Holding my arms over my head, he steered me toward the door. It felt like he could lift me up and carry me if he wanted. I barely managed to keep my toes on the floor. I saw the redhead propping the door up by the frame. That meant the one who had hit me from behind was the bald one with the arms of steel. "You know, Fabio," the redhead poked me in the chest and leaned in close. "Whoa, no way." That was all he said, but he was still staring at me, mouth hanging open in surprise or something. What? I thought, or started to, but my neck was in a powerful vice. I couldn't breathe. It was agony. "Give back what you stole," said the bald one. What did I steal? I had no idea. Ignorance was hard to prove, though. "What's the answer that'll get me out of this?" "Come on, say something," the redhead prompted. The bald one relaxed his grip for a moment, only to move his hands up and shove my head forward. "That hurts," I groaned. "It'll stop hurting if you give it back." The wall of muscle behind me moved, and my feet left the floor. I could feel the capillaries in my eyes about to burst, and then warm fluid running down my cheeks. "Don't cry, dude. That's pathetic." "Cry? I was crying?" "Humph, dumb kid." Suddenly the punishing death grip released me. I tumbled to the redhead's feet, in perfect position to beg for my life. Humiliating, but there wasn't much I could do about it besides stay on the floor and wait for the storm to pass, same as I did when the life stream erupted 2 years ago. "Look, we get it. We know what it does. We can guess why you took it. Just swear you'll never do it again, and we won't rough you up too much." At the prospect of being roughed up anymore, my body had its own set of reactions, namely indigestion and shakes. Shiver. "See, all you wanted was to be a tough guy, but the fact is, you're anything but." "Aw, look, the kid's really scared," the redhead sounded sympathetic now. "That's what we came to do," the bald one pointed out. "Descent in the ranks. Good. Maybe they'll fight each other instead of me." Okay, fine. I knew that wasn't going to happen, but they might keep arguing and give me a minute to find me some good answers at least. "Hey, Fabio, quit staring at the floor." Better do what they tell me. I lifted my head and looked at them, straight for the first time since they busted in. The redhead looked like he turned delinquent as a teenager and never grew out of it. Like those kids in Sector 8 warehouses, who I still hated and admired in equal measure. This guy was looking down at me with some kind of smirk, with the same kind of smirk at the corners of his mouth. The bald one was a good 2 or 3 sizes bigger than his pal, wider and taller. Even in my dim little room, he didn't remove his sunglasses. I imagined he went through life seeing a very different world than I did. "Now we put on our best tough guy acts on our way over, so we can't just leave without roughing anyone up," said the redhead. "Our job is to teach a lesson to anyone who tries to mess with us." I was still scrambling for an explanation to give them. You mean kill me?" was what came out instead. My voice even cracked for good measure. "That's one way to teach a lesson, but we're trying to strike a balance for Shinra here. We want everyone to love us and maybe a little bit scared. Killing you would have the opposite effect." "Do you know who we are?" asked the bald one. I gave 3 quick little nods. They were the Turks from the Shinra company. The one's parents warned their kids about. "You'd better behave, or the Turks will come for you." The second head of the company had gained the sobriquet Doofus Shinra. Not much more imaginative than calling a black cat Jet, but there it was. Because as soon as he'd taken the reins, the whole world had gone to hell. And ever since he'd gotten blown away along with the Shinra building, no one really knew how the company was holding up. Yet these two were standing in my room calling themselves Turks, Shinra's infamous Turks, like nothing had changed at all. They knew their name had an effect on civilians, and they used it to their advantage. When Shinra's shadowy secret first arrived on the scene, it meant that there was a problem wherever problem was, the solution was likely going to involve violence. So, who are we? The redhead chirped. The Turks, sir. Don't sir us. Sorry. Get up. I dragged myself to my feet. My legs were still shaky. Damn, the redhead's fast. And no sooner had I thought it than a blow landed on my face. I staggered to the corner and crashed into the three-legged stool, one of my few pieces of furniture, bringing it down with me. My right eye hurt. He'd socked me in the eye. I touched my face, and it was wet. Blood? No. When I looked at my hand, it was sticky with glow-in-the-dark paint. That should do it, right? You're being too nice, but whatever. I rolled over and listened to them talk behind me. Finally, they were leaving. My whole body went slack, and high-pitched mewing bubbled up from my belly like I was laughing or crying. I couldn't even tell. I hugged my knees to my chest in fetal position and waited for myself to calm down. 3 minutes or maybe 5, and then I got up and shouted the words I'd been biting back the whole time. What the hell is your problem? I was wondering something. I jumped. The redhead was watching me from the doorframe. Is your dad around? It was weird enough that he was still here, and now his complete non sequitur of a question? Hell, the guy was even acting like he hadn't just given me a black eye. Hey, I asked you where your dad is. He died before I was born. I just wanted him gone, so I told him straight. You got a picture or anything? No. What was he like? Your mom must have told you something. Not really. You've never really seen what he looks like? I shook my head. I was trying to be as honest as possible. What about your mom? She's dead. Meteor got her? Yes. The redhead nodded slowly. Well, keep your chin up and don't do anything else stupid, Fabio. So he left without realizing the mistake they'd made in the first place. I flopped on the bed and combed through my memories of what had just happened. Should have done this, should have done that. All sorts of options I hadn't considered fitted through my head. My spirits sank. The throbbing pain around my right eye was demanding my attention. My gut and head ached. I got up and looked in the mirror. A man who'd just taken a punch to the face looked back. Jeez, seems like you've been through the ringer. But hey, it's over with now. You've got a story of how you survived a beating from a Turk. I nodded to myself and washed off the paint on my face, then fixed the door. They'd only ripped it off the hinges when they broke it down. Shoddy construction had its perks. It didn't take that much work to repair. My room was a mess with the spilled paint and all my stuff over the floor. But I left it for later. I took my tan leather jacket from the hook on the wall. The studs I'd added to the collar had a nice dull gleam. But my favorite part was the monster illustration on the back, a bomb on the verge of exploding. I'd paid a little too much for what it was, but I couldn't help myself. I shrugged on the jacket, then took my sturdy shoulder bag from the hiding spot under the bed. I'd broken in the leather strap recently, so it was more comfortable now. Last but not least, I donned a big felt hat, a present from a girl not long ago. There, ready to engage. My building faced a round courtyard about 160 feet across, one of 6 other houses circling the perimeter. The yard itself was littered with things that people thought might be useful. Junk, in other words. The most conspicuous item there was a car, a spacious 5-seater sedan that would have been in the height of luxury years ago, when it was new. Now it's a rusty hunk of scrap and it didn't even start. Doyle insisted it would run fine if it just had the battery, but getting one of those was not an easy prospect. He'd been the first to build and settle in this part of town, and out of respect we all called him Headman Doyle. He was a burly guy, in his early 30s or so, with thick, expressive eyebrows, endless cheer, and a consuming need to be around people. Almost 2 years ago, he put up a building himself and invited his friends to live together with him. In fact, he built it for that very purpose. Soon enough, his friends called their friends, and the first place filled with more folk than it could hold, and everyone joined forces to build more living spaces. With every able-bodied man, woman, and child pitching in, they raised other houses next to the headman's, forming a circular space around his car and the piles of building materials that became a communal courtyard. There were 5 houses the first time I went to visit a friend who lived there. I was promptly introduced to the headman, who invited me to claim the empty lot that kept the circle from being complete. That sounded good to me, and so, to close the loop, I moved to Doyleville. As I came out of my place, a ratty little face timidly poked out from the red door of the headman's home. It belonged to a small and scruffy guy, probably about the same age as me, who had bristly hair that stuck out every which way and made his head look too big for the rest of him. I'd been seeing him around for about a week now, always in the same dirty gray overalls. "Oh man, you're okay," he said. "That's a relief." So he'd seen some of what had gone down. I rubbed the swollen right side of my face to indicate that actually I wasn't exactly in tip-top shape. "Not totally okay, huh? Well, then the Turks came. When they came, I freaked out and pointed them to your place. I figured if anyone could handle them, you could. Sorry about that." "Nah, you made a good call." The sentiment was mostly genuine. That was why he'd sent them my way. I didn't mind. It meant my efforts to cultivate an image had been a success. "Want me to rig you a bomb to get back at him?" he offered. "A bomb?" "You know, like to demolish buildings. I can set you up." I told him I'd think about it, but the truth was I had no desire for any more involvement with the Turks. He gave me a solemn nod and closed the door. I locked the white door to my own place and knocked on the green door to the neighboring house. "Fabio," I called to my friend. "It's Evan. Open up." My name, the one I had all my life, is Evan Townsend. Shortly, the door cracked open and I saw a waist-high face looking up at me. "Hey, Evan." "Hey." It was Bits Braun, Fabio's little brother, in miniature clone. The two of them lived here, surrounded by all shades of green. They'd been orphaned 2 years ago when the Sector 7 collapse crushed their home, parents and all. They had escaped death as they'd disappeared as They escaped death as they'd happened to be in Sector 3 slums at the time. Apparently, they'd gone to see the house and its lush flower garden. It wasn't the blossoms they were interested in, though, but the green foliage. "Where's Fabio?" I asked. "He's out. I think he's at work." "Oh yeah, he would be." "What happened to your eye?" "This? I fell. I was standing on a chair to paint the ceiling and lost my balance." "Was that the big crash? It woke me up." "Sorry." "It's okay. The medicine makes it so it doesn't hurt anymore, so I don't want to just sleep all the time," said Bits. "I wanted to go out, but Fabio told me to stay in, so I started reading and fell asleep." "Medicine?" He must have found something for his geostigma. Bits had the symptoms, the telltale dark bruises spreading down his forehead from the hairline, and I'd heard that they were on his back too, oozing black pus. They said that the pain wasn't bad every day, but when it was excruciating. "Is there a new treatment around?" I said. "I haven't heard about it." Bits clamped his mouth shut and avoided his eyes. "What did Fabio tell you not to talk about, even to me?" "Well, I guess I can tell you. So, it's a new medicine. It just came out. It doesn't make everything better, but it makes the pain go away," he said. "It's an analgesic?" "Fabio got it from a doctor," Bits finished, full of pride. "Aha! It all came together. At first, the pain and humiliation were for a good cause. At least the pain and humiliation. At least the pain and humiliation were for a good cause." Yeah, I'm not gonna edit any of this out. This is natural. This is natural reading. Edge, the city was called, for a long time unofficially, now officially. 2 years ago, the land east of Midgar's steel metropolis was a barren waste. But a bustling town sprang up, and now there were even several high-rises under construction. I didn't see why anyone needed so many tall buildings, though. There was still plenty of open land. Not that I cared, honestly. People could build what they wanted. Edge was a free city. I walked along the main avenue toward the plaza. The road, which stretched due east from Midgar, had started out as a freight route for materials salvaged from the wreckage. The structures made with those materials clustered on either side of the road, and the city grew out from there like a spokes on a wheel. The skyline changed by the day. If you visited the same places every day, you could watch the city change before your very eyes, almost. I admit that I'm kind of a cynic, and I tend to find fault wherever I go. But you know what? I can't say a thing about Edge, and it's a testament to human resilience. Whenever I feel weary, I just look at the city. The quickest way from Doyleville to Seventh Heaven, our meeting spot, was through the central plaza. About 2 years ago, some Shinra military officers showed up from the Junon base and declared that the area would be the center of the city. He enlisted his own men and local volunteers to carry out the construction, but he disappeared soon after the work started. Rumor had it he was murdered. Some kind of power struggle amongst the Shinra remnants, probably. The volunteers inherited the plans and finished the initial stage of the project, but the work never stopped. Most days you'd find as many as 50 or even 100 volunteers down there building a monument to the victims of meteor fall, for the repose of their souls or something like that. Guess it was for a good cause, but to be honest, I didn't care for the people doing it. Overzealous do-gooders. Look at me, look how noble I am, helping build a brighter future for my fellow man and the whole world. Hey kid, that red-haired Turk was watching me from the middle of the plaza, leaning against the monument's half-built scaffolding. He was beckoning me over. Damn it, of course they'd be here. The Turks were in charge of the construction. Why Shinra wanted to be involved was kind of a mystery. And all those volunteers were like so many fledglings huddling under the wings of their company. Which was one more reason I didn't care for them. Hey Fabio, come join in. It might cause me more trouble if I refused, but I wasn't interested in palling around with that asshole who'd given me a black eye. I kept walking and tried to think of the response that would get him off my case, but it wasn't necessary. The redhead suddenly turned back to work as if his boss had given him a metaphorical kick in the rear. Hope the monument collapses and crushes your dumb head under a ton of steel, I muttered, but not so close that he could hear. I walked a third of the way around the plaza and took one of the roads radiating outward. The city was still young and growing, but I liked these older streets, the ones that were first laid down. The pavement was better, and the houses on either side were classier looking than most others. They were still put together with salvaged scrap, but at least the builders had made an effort to hide that fact. The place I was headed for was just a short walk down the street, but for those few moments, I could pretend like I was back in Midgar, back in Sector 7. I hated Shinra, but that didn't change the fact Midgar was my hometown. Seventh Heaven stood halfway along the fine street, diner by day. Seventh Heaven stood halfway along the fine street, diner by day, bar by night. It was where we held most of our company meetings. Tifa ran the place, and man, she was a knockout. 25 years old and with curves in all the good places. Her sidekick and helper was Marlene, a smart girl who took BS from no one and was pretty much the mascot of the place. Come on in, Tifa said warmly. Some guys would miss that smile, too busy checking out the rest of her charms, if you catch my drift. But not me. There was something really comforting about it. She scanned the room and pointed out the table where my friends were. I nodded my thanks. It was a little ritual we repeated every time I came. I didn't ask for it, or hope for any more than that. It's one of the unwritten rules of being a regular. The other three were already here. The guy with the round face and black frame glasses was Fabio Braun, Bits' older brother. He wore green most days. Today, his shirt was even greener and louder than usual, if that was possible. Bet he'd kill for a pair of glasses with green frames. Fabio hadn't seen me yet, too busy glowering in a cup of coffee, by the looks of it. Was he worried about his brother, or beating himself up for stealing drugs from Shinra? To Fabio's right was Leslie Kyle. He had short, pale hair that went well with his dark, weathered complexion. From his deep-set eyes and thin, pinched lips, you might think he was a man of few words. But you'd be wrong. He was smart, well-read, and gregarious, which meant he pretty much always knew the latest news and gossip. At the moment, though, he was propping his face in one hand, his eyes closed. He often looked sleepy these days for some reason. Kyrie Canaan sat with her back facing me, in her usual leather jacket with cut-off sleeves. Her black hair fell to the middle of her back, and today she's curled the ends inward. She had her elbows on the table, hands folded in front of her face, as she examined her fingernails. From the way her narrow shoulders kept moving, she was probably singing to herself again, although I couldn't tell you what. Maybe the jingle from the ads on the Casa del Sol resort. Well, damn, I could stand here all day and they might still never notice me. Hey, I called and walked over. Leslie looked up and scowled when he saw the bruising around my eye. Fabio didn't lift his head from his coffee, but I did hear something resembling a hi. Hey, Fabio, you could at least look up. I want you to see what my face had to go through. See, the hat does look good on you, Kyrie blurted, overjoyed. Yeah, it's not bad. I shifted the shoulder bag to my front and sat down. But what happened to your face, Evan? She gestured, point blank, as her eyes went even bigger. Kind of a long story, I began, and then realized Fabio still hadn't looked up from his coffee. Not cool, man. Hey, Fabio, you should have told me you were going out. Yeah, sorry. He reluctantly raised his head, seeing me at last. Whoa, what happened to your face? Turks, actually. 2 of them dropped by for a visit, I said, daring him to own up to his crime. What about my bro? He stared anxiously. Bits is fine. Fabio sighed in obvious relief. Kyrie looked from me to Fabio. What's going on, guys? She asked. What, Turks? Why wouldn't Bits be fine? Well, facts are always facts, but truth is more complicated. There are as many versions of the truth as there are people involved, so I told them mine, beginning with when the Turks showed up at my house. Maybe I played up the violence I'd endured at the hands of the redhead and Baldy, but a man's got to protect his image, right? When I was done, I ordered some tea from Marlene and leaned back. I'm so sorry, Evan, Fabio lamented. It's all my fault. I feel awful. Don't worry about it, I said, feeling generous now. I'm just glad Bits didn't get hurt. They were rough customers. I don't think that they would have had gone easy on a kid. Fabio, said Leslie, what did you do? Couldn't I be the center of attention for a little longer? Oh well. I heard that the remaining Shinra people developed a drug to test the pain of geostigma, said Fabio. They were keeping it at the clinic out on the cliffs, healing, so I took some. That was dumb, Fabio, Kyrie scowled. You've got to be smarter than that. It's just everything fell right into place. The guy staying at the headman's place, Kyo, his friend, was a guard who they were stashing the... It's from with a guard where they were stashing the drug. Kyo had to be that rat-faced bomb maker who pointed out the Turks my way. So, his friends owed him a favor, and he owed me a favor, and we agreed it would clear everyone's debts all at once. So I went over there when the friend, his name's Throp, when Throp was on duty, I took some of the stuff. That's it, done and dusted. Now I was mad. That's it, huh? What about my massive shiner? So did it work? Asked Kyrie. How's Bits doing? He says he feels a hell of a lot better, says Fabio. But I don't know when it wears off, maybe the pain will get worse. So it's just temporary, huh? Better than nothing. He actually thought that was the end of the discussion. No way, we're reopening this. This thing is not done and dusted, I said. You got that? You get that, right? The Turks were after you. How did they find out who you are and where you live? Do you think we've heard the end of this? Oh no, man. I know. Throp must have talked. Shit. Maybe they tortured him. Fabio clutched his head and grabbed 2 fistfuls of hair. I'm sure he's okay, Kyrie said gently. Maybe he just got roughed up a bit, but Evan's still here, right? They didn't kill him, so they wouldn't have done anything worse to Throp. She was just being nice, trying to keep Fabio from feeling too guilty, but I'd be damned if I was going to let Fabio feel better about this. Except we're talking the Turks, I cut in. You know, the cold-blooded killers. Kyrie ignored me. Look, Fabio, you can't think about going out there to rescue Throp or anything, okay? You don't want to keep messing with Shinra, and healing's hard to get through anyway. I rented a truck from Kyo's hookup, although it did cost every last gil I had. Monsters will get you before you're even halfway there. Didn't have any trouble the first time. My good deeds must have been paying off for something. Really, Fabio, are you out of your mind? Kyrie frowned at him, like she was thinking the same thing. If you ask me, I say it is done and dusted, said Leslie, who had been maintaining a judicious silence until now. Word on the street is they're ready to go into mass production. Once the drug's widely available, they're not going to care a rat's ass about the handful Fabio stole. They may have gotten the wrong guy, but as far as they're concerned, they've dealt with it. So they're going to sell it like they wanted to sell Mako, is that it? Just business, right? Fabio's voice climbed in anger. First energy, now drugs. Those bastards love having a monopoly of things people need. Fabio hated Shinra with every fiber of his being. Everyone had heard that rumor from Sector 7 collapse was an inside job, planned and even executed by the Shinra company. Fabio was one of the last people I knew who took it as a gospel of truth. Well, you're in for a surprise then, Fabio. Leslie raised a black-gloved hand to quiet him. The WRO is going to manufacture and distribute it free of charge. Seriously? No such thing as free lunch or medicine, I scoffed, unable to hide my cynicism. Besides, wasn't the WRO leader a bigwig at Shinra too? It's kind of all linked. It's Shinra's world all over again. The rest of us just get to live in it. I might have been talking too loudly. Some of the other customers were turning to stare. I don't think the WRO is that bad, though, Kyrie argued. They're just trying to restore some law and order. I couldn't back down now, could I? Oh, sure. That's what they'll call it. Their guns are pointed at monsters now, but wait till they turn them on our city. I had no evidence for the accusation. Even to me, it sounded far-fetched. You okay, Evan? Said Kyrie. Sounds like you're just trying to pick a fight. Well, my eye hurts. Leslie leaned back. I could tell he was going into speech mode. I don't care if it's Shinra or the WRO or whoever. All these little coteries will pop up with their plans for the future and then fall by the wayside. And that's fine by me. It's good to have plenty of choices. After all, we're living in an age where people can forge their own paths. Anyone who wants to clear a new one can go right ahead. If I think something is good, I'll support it. If I don't care for it, I'll leave well enough alone. Seriously, my eye really hurts. I knew I was starting to sound like a kid. Leslie probably thought so too. But I had built up too much momentum to stop myself. Someone help me. Now, as far as Shinra goes, Leslie gave me a look and continued. Kyrie was saying that they were satisfied with just knocking people around. That may be true, but I think they had deeper concerns. The main reason they didn't kill Evan is because it would be bad for their image. Now, why would they worry about that? Hearts and minds, that's why. They may still be Shinra in name, but they don't have the means they once had to suppress criticism by force. Well, I'd like to agree, but Leslie, you don't know that for sure. We have no idea how powerful they still are, Fabio said nervously. Think about it. They needed guards for an expensive drug, and they gave the job to a nobody who would aid and abet theft to repay favor to a friend. Seems to me they had a serious manpower shortage. You could be right about that, Fabio conceded. Kyrie was watching Leslie listening closely to every word. Sure, you run into people in the plaza who claim to be affiliated with Shinra, but they're not Turks. And they sure don't seem to have much influence anymore. Have you given any other thought as to why? Kyrie and Fabio both shook their head and nodded. They both shook their head. I nodded. Crap! Didn't mean to do that, but Leslie continued as if he hadn't noticed. When we say Shinra, we only think of the stupid huge company, right? Remember, Shinra is also the name of the founder and his son. They're considered public enemies now. But those two were once the most important people on the planet. They ran practically everything. They say the higher you climbed in the company, the more you came to fear the president and adore him. Now, I've heard the people calling the successor Doofus Shinra, but I think he must have been sharper than the tack. I would have liked to meet him. Good-looking guy, I remember, Kyrie remarked. Actually, Evan, you kind of look like him. What? Just kidding. So anyway, you were nodding away like you knew stuff. Why don't you tell us why Shinra isn't the big bad wolf anymore? She's asking me? Well, if Doofus, I had to rethink fast and guess where Leslie's argument was leading. I mean, Rufus Shinra really is dead. They don't have a charismatic leader anymore to hold the company together. There's no one to pull in new people to rebuild the organization. I was relieved when I saw Leslie tilt his head in agreement. Wait a minute, Kyrie turned to Fabio. Then who came up with the geostigma medicine? Apparently a team of ex-Shinra chemists assembled by the Turks. No one's seen the president, said Fabio. He must have gotten the intel from Throp. So Shinra, nothing to fear now, commented Kyrie. Is that about the size of it? Well, I wouldn't say nothing, said Leslie. But I don't think we have too much to worry about for now. He turned to look at me. Anyway, Evan, that was really brave of you, not speaking up about their mistaken identity and just taking the hits. I'm impressed. You could have opened with that, I thought. I'm so sorry that you got dragged into it. Fabio shook his head. He actually looked contrite. I owe you one. A big one. Hell, maybe I'll even take a bullet for you one day. You sure you want to do that? I reached forward quickly and smeared my finger on his glasses, leaving a dirty smudge. Hey, you know I hate that, he protested, laughing. That was all the payback I needed. Okay, guys, I guess that's meeting adjourned, Kyrie declared. The rest of us stopped laughing and eyed her, not like her to ditch the agenda. Hold up, I thought. You were going to brief us about the new job, said Leslie. Exactly. That was why we were all here. Well, Kyrie looked down. Turns out I'm seeing the client today, not yesterday like I thought. So, no business to discuss? Not yet, she rubbed her bare shoulders, although it wasn't cold. Actually, I better get going to the appointment, Evan. Come with me. Okay? I don't know the guy, so it would be good to have backup. Sure. I wish we still had phones, Kyrie said with a sigh. Would make it easier to arrange stuff without all this face-to-face. Phones were a rare commodity. Didn't used to be one, of course, but without anyone manufacturing new ones, demand far outpaced supply. Folk who still had old phones from before Meteor Fall weren't usually willing to part with them. Handsets would occasionally pop up on the market at absurdly high prices and fly off the proverbial shelves. Although, come to think of it, some people would also find a batch in the warehouse and generously sell them for next to nothing. You had to just be in the right place at the right time. If having a phone these days was a mark of good fortune, we were as unlucky as they come. Let's get going. Kyrie stood and headed for the counter to pay the tab. Boss's treat today, huh? Leslie grinned. Fabio quietly clapped in appreciation. Fabio headed back to Doyleville, as the rest of us, Kyrie, Leslie, and I, headed for our office in the slums. You might be wondering why we didn't hold our meetings there, but the fact is, we just like hanging out at Seventh Heaven. The vibe was cool, but more than that, I think it made us feel important to go out and discuss work while dishing out Gil for food and drink. Well, I couldn't be sure about the others, but that was how I feel. A little bit, secretly. How do you think this next job will pay? Leslie wondered, trying hard but failing to sound like he didn't care. The introduction came from Miss Rich we saw the other day, said Kyrie. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Mrs. Rich was what we called any female client who looked well-headed. I hope it pans out. I need to start building up some funds. My girlfriend moved in. Oh, wow, Kyrie whirled around him dramatically. Since when? About 2 months ago, actually. She's pregnant, due in 7 months. Whoa. I was completely dumbstruck by the unexpected announcement. That's great, Leslie, said Kyrie after a few seconds of walking in silence. Her voice was choked up. I'm really happy for you. You're not getting teary-eyed on me, are you? He teased. It's just, after all we've been through. Who is she? I interrupted. Kyrie and Leslie went way back to before I'd known either of them. I seriously did not want them jawing off about the old days again. Her name is Merle. I'll get around to introducing you to her soon, said Leslie. But right now, I gotta run. Need to pick up some stuff for home. Catch you later. He walked briskly away, ending the discussion there. Kyrie and I watched him as he headed towards one of the old ladies who sell fruit out of street side carts, usually at a huge markup. Even the rotten stuff that no one would have touched in the old days cost a small fortune. How's he gonna pay for fruit? I wondered. He better hope we get more clients in soon, Kyrie replied. We fell into step to each other, still watching him as he haggled with the old lady. Leslie's theatrics, as he described his pregnant girlfriend, were a sight to behold. Finally, they appeared to agree on a price, and he paid for 2 pieces of red fruit. He started to leave, but the old lady called him back again and gave him 3 smallish yellow ones, too. You think we're going to lose him? Said Kyrie. If he quits, he quits. I can work double shifts. She said nothing and started walking. I trailed after her, a vague unease starting to creep over me. Yes, sir. Understood, Elena replied smartly. although she neither understood nor agreed with the orders coming over the phone. Reno had let Fabio off with just one measly punch. Maybe just a lowlife didn't maybe the lowlife didn't need to die, Elena thought, but they could have at least given him something to remember. A month in the hospital, say. This was for Shinra and for the Turks. What's going to happen to me? Throp moaned from his chair. He'd been tied there since yesterday. Dry blood flaked off his cheeks. You'll die, probably, said Elena. Please let me go. I was in the Shinra military too. We're comrades, ain't we? She knew not to give losers like him a second chance. Left alone, he could go on to blemish Shinra's name somewhere else. Elena took a pair of leather gloves from her back pocket and pulled them down, facing Throp. What's going on here? She spun around. Sang was standing at the door. Elena bit back the rest of her words. I can't stand this. She ducked past her boss and ran outside. Number 6, Muriel's Investigative Services. Kyrie and I walked out to the end of the main street. Although folk from the slums would call the beginning, here was just the boundary between Edge and the slums, and the far side was another world. Kyrie navigated the labyrinth effortlessly, like it was second nature, and I admired her light movements as I did my best to keep up. I liked following her, letting her take lead, though I couldn't have told you why. Fabio promised he wouldn't steal anymore, she complained. It was for his brother, though. It's not like he had a lot of choices, I said. I'd probably do the same. Except I wouldn't. It wasn't in me, that kind of daring. I might plan on doing it, but all the while I'd be looking for an excuse to back out. What should we do? Asked Kyrie. He broke the rules. By rights, he should be fired. Forgive and forget. Otherwise, we won't have any people left. Thus saith the Lifestream, she suddenly intoned. Evan alone will never leave, for this is the best of all places he could be. As far as prophecies went, that sounded just fine to me. The Lifestream doesn't foretell stuff. That's not a thing. Why don't we make it a thing? Prophecy's also available. We'd rake it in and retire to Costa del Sol in style. Nah, the angry mob will string us up from Midgar's supports long before that. You're so morbid. The four of us, Kyrie, Leslie, Fabio, and I, operated a detective outfit by the illustrious name of Muriel's Investigative Service. The name Muriel was we borrowed from Kyrie's grandmother, a career con artist. Her parents, as it happened, were really good pickpockets. Good as in skilled, obviously. No one claimed they were pillars of the community, though. The young Kyrie herself lived a life of crime before turning to a private investigation, which was how our paths crossed in the first place. We've been operating for close to 2 years now, and most of our business was finding missing persons and items. For about a year after the Midgar disaster, so many similar firms popped up, and it felt like we were competing with half the population. Loads of people were scrambling to make a living in this new reality, and there was plenty of work. Nearly everyone was looking for someone or something they had lost in the chaos. By now, though, the number of rivals and clients had dwindled. The world had become calmed down a little more, and most people had settled into whatever new lives they'd managed to carve out of the new world. Folk were solving their own puzzles, and there was less demand for our type of service. But that wasn't the same as no demand, and thanks to a certain marketable idea, we had enough work to get by. Lifestream readings. That was a tagline for Muriel's Investigative Services. Customers were told that Kyrie had the unique ability to tap into the Lifestream's hidden currents of information, and that she could use the power to find missing people and lost items. It was our agency's big selling point. You've probably guessed already, she could no more tap into the Lifestream than behemoths can tap dance. Kyrie dreamed up the scheme about a year ago. After 17 straight days of no clients, Leslie thought the idea brilliant and was all for trying it out, while Fabio said it'd never work. I mean, who the hell would believe it? But to my shock, it did work. So many people bought into our dumb story and about the currents of the Lifestream bearing the memories of wisdom of those who had passed on. Even I started wondering if maybe there was something to it after all. Except that in reality, for every satisfied customer, we had 4 who we failed to help. But those few successes were touted by a word of mouth and they were just enough to get us new clients every couple days or so. We collected a no-refund deposit and then a bonus for a successful job, and the deposits alone were enough for us to get by on. Not that we were defrauding people, far from it. Kyrie and the rest of us put in legwork and did everything we could to find whatever or whoever our clients were looking for. Kyrie was dedicated to the job and thought herself as a proper investigator. Sure, our advertising was on the fanciful side, but we were still selling genuine product. The majority of our jobs involved searching for people or items that had gone missing 2 years ago when the lifestream breached the surface. We limited our operations to Midgar and Edge, so there wasn't too much ground for us to cover, but 2 years was a long time. If the missing person was alive and wanted to be found, they would have shown up by now. Most of the items were either stolen or long gone, never to be seen again. The people who came to us had already mostly given up. They often figured, if it doesn't pan out, I'll just let it go. Muriel was their last hope, and I guess that's why we put so much effort into every job. When we reported back, we take everything we learned from the investigations and weave it together with whatever Kyrie claimed to hear from the live stream. And then she would feed the client an emotional and plausible account of what happened. That way, even if the job was a failure, they still left with a sense of closure. We weren't just finders, see? We were providing comfort. You can't say that about too many jobs these days. So, who's the new client? I asked as Kyrie stepped ahead of me. A man named Arde. She laughed. She sighed. I know, beggars can't be choosers. But I wish more of our clients were women. A lot of men get the wrong idea. She groused. More than once, a potential male client had tried asking her out for drinks. You shouldn't be too surprised that guys find you attractive. As usual, I was dropping the most oblique hint possible. Yeah, thanks, I guess. Leslie says I should keep my guard up around men. Leslie. Anyways, I'm with you today, I said. I won't let it get weird. Mr. Arade better be a doddering grandpa.